Hello, welcome to the Futurist Mindset with Fifth Avenue Capital. My name is Tessa, and I'm going to introduce you to Reagan Rodriguez, who's our host. He's a futurist that teaches stratosphere wealthy legacy families how to become impact investors. Hello, Reagan. How are you?
I am doing very well. Good afternoon to you. How are you doing on this afternoon, Tessa?
Beautiful. It's just one of those days that you just can't help but smile, right? So,
Yeah.
but I know that you're going to talk to us about two things. In the first, you're actually going to share your underground cafe fund launch that you use with your clients to raise capital, but you also use it for yourself, correct?
Right. I drink my own Kool-Aid, or as they say in the south of France, I eat my own dog food.
Oh, I haven't heard that one before. That's
They
fun.
they don't know what that means. Whenever I speak to the guys at Fairmont, Joris, and I say things like, I drink my own Kool-Aid, they don't get it. It's like over their heads. But then also the younger generation, whenever I say I drink my own Kool-Aid and I tell my interns that, they're like, what do you mean? And they don't know it. But in the south of France, they have a similar expression. It's just, I eat my own dog food. So I'm going to be going over how I help my clients raise capital. And I do it as well, as you know, for a very worthy cause that I'll be launching soon. So was there something else on the introduction?
Well, and then we have a couple questions that we're going to cover at the end. So yes, but we'll start with this because I'm excited to learn this. And it is a little bit, this is diving deep. It's almost like you're, pulling back the curtains for us a little bit. So I'm excited. So take it away.
Yeah, as you know, some people might confuse what I do, especially if somebody's that person that is wanting to acquire businesses or acquire investments, whether it's a multi-unit apartment or a hotel. They'll say, I know about this multi-unit apartment that's at 95% capacity. And the point that they're trying to make to me is that it makes logical and business sense. So who's going to say no to that? Well, you're right. And the funding I do takes time, right? If you're asking for 30 or $50 million, it's not going to happen in less than 30 days. So if that multi-unit apartment is really at 98% capacity, then chances are it's going to get sold out from under you before I'm able to raise the capital. So instead, I will say to that person, I prefer more the construction of an assisted living facility, the construction of a multi-unit apartment, because we can take that money, we buy the land, then we take more of the money as we're raising more money, and then we begin breaking ground. So what I'll do is, instead of explaining, I'll just show you. This is my underground cafe fund launch. And I call it cafe because it's continuous agreement for future equity. Let me go to slide 2 here. Within any fund, whether it's a hedge fund, private equity fund, venture capital fund, or what I like doing, growing humanitarian funds and then scaling them, there are 3 distinct roles within all funds. Now, you don't necessarily need those 3 people. You just need to know how to structure it. Let me begin by saying this as it's mentioned on the left-hand side here. A fund is nothing more than a pool of money that is created by contributions from investors. And then that fund manager, which is right here, the one in red, gets to use that pool to make investments. So if you're a client of mine, let's assume, Tessa, you and Brian you saw this piece of land that is probably outside of your price range, but you said, gosh, I'd love to own that land that's got 100 acres somewhere in Tennessee, right? And you'd say, I have this idea of what I'd like to do with it, and I'd like to do this humanitarian initiative. Okay, well, then you're going to be the fund manager, all right? Guess what? If you sent me the business plan on what you're going to do with it, so let's assume you're going to let's assume it's going to be some hub for nonprofits, and it's going to be a big building and they can all share space there. And it would almost be like a co-working space. And you had this business plan. Then guess what? You're also the expert. The reason why I say that is typically in a hedge fund, there's the fund manager, and then there's people sending him deals. And then the hedge fund decides whether they approve the project or they decline it. And then there are the money raisers. So here's what I do for my clients, and I do it for myself as well. I serve as the fund manager and the expert because I put together that business plan. So if you have that business plan, what you're going to do is, as the investments are made, you're going to get paid a percentage. And then so do the investors. So a lot of people don't know this, but by law, you're allowed to charge a 2% management fee. So let's assume at month one, me as the money raiser sends in $5 million here to you and Brian as the fund managers. Then by law, you get to take 100,000 of that, which is 2%, and that's your salary. You guys can use it however you want. And then the other 4,900,000 has to be used for the business. Make sense, Tessa?
Yes.
Then if another 5 million comes in, another 100,000 goes to you. And again, you could buy a car with that for all we care. It does not matter. That is your salary. Okay. Now, again, let's assume this is a big project you're wanting to do. And you're wanting to build, you're going to want to put wind turbines on there and solar, and you're wanting to build this alternative energy community where you're going to have homes that you'll Airbnb. Then in that case, you might need 30 million. And each time money comes in, you get a small salary. So some people argue with me and they'll say, my goodness, to build a fund for 30 million may take a year. Let's say it takes 2 years. 2% of 30 million is 600,000. So you've got a salary that you can use for the next 3 years before you reach profitability. Does that make sense, Tessa?
Yes, I had no idea that's how it worked.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that because I have a lot of attorneys or former attorneys as clients, and sometimes they might argue with me on this, and they say, Reagan, this can take $80,000 to $120,000 to do. And I say, you're right. If you're a dum-dum and you go to legal first, okay? So this is why I say it's my underground secrets. We're going to go with the deal first. So as you know, Tessa, clients send me a business plan. I then, before we go to, I tell them I'm going to review and digest the business plan before we go to the next step. So I never have that call or that Zoom meeting until I do this, that you see, I test it with investors. And then if they don't like it, then we got to go back to the drawing board. So first we find the deal. I want to make sure that it's an incredible deal. Then when I meet with my investors, we frame it. Are we going to do debt or are we going to do equity? We're not going to do debt. Why? Because I don't like debt. If I don't want debt in my life, why am I going to place that burden on my client's life? So we're going to do equity. And generally, we're going to take 20% equity. And that's going to be on the net. So let's assume year one, you netted nothing because you have not finished with your fund. Then you owe nothing, right? Then let's say even at year two, you still didn't really net much. Then again, we're in it for the long haul. This is not like some private equity fund where someone's going to put a gun to your head and say, time's up, you got to pay us back. As I've shared with you, Tessa, and I've mentioned on here, the investors I work with are more legacy investors, kind of stratosphere wealthy. So they're not about wealth creation, but rather wealth preservation. Mm-hmm. So they're in it for the long haul. So let's assume then at year three, you're netting $1 million. Then 200,000 would go to the equity investors, 800,000 remains with you. Now, even when we're doing this, I don't want to get too much into this, but sometimes, and I've even had some attorneys say, but Reagan, you're already started raising money and we haven't finished with the fund yet. And I say, actually, I know this isn't your area of expertise. You may want to check with an attorney friend of yours, but by law, you actually have 60 days before you file it. So again, we're talking about soft commitments, and you say, the paperwork isn't done yet. Be patient with me, and we're drawing that up. So last part before I go to the next slide, see where I say this is how people like us do it? What do I mean by that? I mean, unless your name is Ray Dalio, right, at Bridgewater Capital, who's been right for the past 30 years, you have to tell people what you're going to do with the money and how you're going to frame it. So, for example, there is a very successful hedge fund manager, just lives up the street here from me, Ken Griffin, Citadel. Same thing. The guy's been right for the past 30 years. So when he raises capital, he does not tell them what the deal is. He just says, these are the returns you're going to get. If they say, that doesn't sit well with me, I'd like to know what you're doing with the business, you'd say, bye-bye, go talk to somebody like Reagan, right? In other words, they've been right for the past 20, 30 years, so they don't have to tell you what they do with the investments. That's not us. So whenever I tell my potential client, this is how people like us do it, I had somebody say, oh, that's a slam. It's not a slam. I'm talking about myself too, right? Before I go to the next slide, do you want to talk on that? Do you understand what I mean? Like, if you were going to invest in something, wouldn't you want to know what you're investing in and what the returns are? Do you want to talk on that?
I've heard a lot of amazing funds. I've learned about them from your show and recording with you on these. So I understand. I mean, you have all different, they have different plans and different goals that they're trying to accomplish with each fund. So
very good.
I think it makes sense to me.
You actually listen when I talk. That's right. Let me go to the next slide. So sometimes I've had people say, well, Reagan, why would I want to do this? Why can't I just do a syndication? And that's something that's very popular in South Florida, syndications. And the main reason why they're popular is because of what I have down here, the speed, and it's less expensive. All you really need is an operating agreement and an LLC. And what a syndication is, just so you know, that's like somebody that knows about that property that's foreclosed or it's been abandoned, bank owned, and maybe it's selling for $250, but it's really appraised at $500,000, but it's got mold and it's got windows knocked out. And so somebody's a contractor and they say, I could get it looking beautiful and we could sell it for $500,000, but he doesn't have the $250. So maybe he goes to that friend of his, or maybe he goes to his doctor. This is what's typical with syndications. And they say to that physician friend of his, hey, if you lend me $300,000, we'll buy the home. I need $50,000 to repair it. We'll sell it for $500,000 and then we'll split the profits, right? Well, that's fine and sounds great in theory, but what you don't know is that by law, he could kick you out of the deal. There's actually a clause that says that you could get voted out as an 86% vote. It's what you hear about in the news when they say a hostile takeover. The other thing is, let's assume it's someone you do trust and you guys walked away with the great returns and you say, let's do this again. I know about another home that's foreclosed. Well, you can't. You can't do deal one, deal two. You're going to have to get another operating agreement, another LLC done. So with what I recommend is you can do deal two, deal three, deal four. You can do multiple projects that even people send you. Now, some people have asked me, so what's the catch? Because I have friends that have several other deals that they haven't gotten funded. You're telling me, Reagan, I could be a mini private equity group and get equity on it. And I say, well, now hold on, there is a catch. The catch is the fund's got to be consistent. So for example, if we're going to do one in alternative energy, and I really had this happen once, somebody was going to buy land and then we were going to put wind turbines up there and solar. and make it like an alternative energy fund. And then this guy had to call to say, Reagan, I found this piece of property somewhere in Texas, and there's reason to believe that there might be oil underneath that property. And I'm thinking, no, reason to believe. You don't even know. You're not a geologist. You don't know about any of this stuff. That is so risky. Plus, I don't want anything to do with that because I'm all about alternative energy, and this fund that we're building and the investors that I'm talking to are about green initiatives. So again, I don't want to do my public service announcement when I click on this. Instead, I'll just say this: be consistent with the fund, right? If you're going to do one on alternative energy, no, you're not going to raise capital for drilling for oil and gas. So that I kind of went over everything in, gosh, I think I did this in a little over 5 minutes.
But it helps me a lot to understand more about what you do and what you're looking for too. So obviously you work in the greener space, I would say, alternative energy. A lot of the projects that you work on are in that space. So obviously you're very passionate about it.
I am. Is there something else you want to mention before I go into? Okay.
Nope.
Awesome. Well, here's what I thought. Now that I shared that, I want to go over what inspires you to take action. I was just talking to Tessa about this before we got on, that I have trouble sometimes, right? So think about what makes you feel fulfilled, right? What life experiences maybe excite you, and excite you to make that change or cause that change around you. One of the things I know I do is I allow my responses to these questions to fuel my vision. So maybe I'm going to now say it this way: allow your responses to these questions to fuel your vision today, right? Whenever I am feeling frustrated, unsure, or down, what I've noticed is most of the time it's because I may be struggling with a lack of vision. When you have a vision of something that is compelling you forward, then you begin to expand and reinforce what you believe is possible in your life. And so if you'd like to know what could be a goal around that, maybe a good goal would be to maybe write down one thing you see in your future that brings a smile to your face, just thinking about it. And then another thing you just helped me think about, Tessa, because you're really good about this, is your why. And I mentioned at the beginning that I have trouble being motivated as well. And I always say, what do we need the why for? Can't we just do it? Well, you can. And it's easy to lose sight of your vision when emotional distractions set in. Tessa, you know me, I can get emotional, right? So emotional distractions, what do they have a way of doing? For me, they have a way of setting up camp and impacting my energy for days, weeks. And again, you don't want to be in a situation where it impacts you for months. Sometimes it can come from nowhere. And you're wondering, how do I get back to my kind of high energy state, right? A helpful way that I have found to change my emotional state is to focus on something I'm grateful for right now. And then something you're grateful for that you already see in your future. So here's something else I thought. It's a fun paradox for you today. The only thing we can be sure of is uncertainty, right? Because we live in an uncertain universe. So our options are struggle against that or work with that. Let me close with this. If you actually love the uncertainty you often worry about, I think I worded that wrong. Let me think of it. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if I can actually love the uncertainty I'm often worried about. maybe it's possible that I could enjoy the not knowing. Similarly to going to a movie for the first time. And one last thing, I have thoughts, but I am not my thoughts. I'm going to choose today to become slightly skeptical. No, I'm going to choose to become a slightly skeptical observer of the content of my mind. And I'm going to ask myself, do I believe what I'm thinking?
That's powerful. That's powerful.
Thank you. I kind of surprised myself.
That was good. That's good. Well, I've written down a lot of notes. I don't know. Usually I take notes, but today I had to write down a couple of really big ones. So it is lack of vision that can sabotage what we're doing. And then you also said write down something that makes you smile or your gratitude, maybe a gratitude journal. And all of those, I think, really do help us to get out of those emotional funks or just uninspired moments, which I think you did a great job giving us some things that we can take action on today to get more inspired and ultimately more fulfilled.
Very good. Thank you, Tessa.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you all next week. If you hit the bell to get notified when we are live, you just hit the bell or subscribe and you'll get notifications, and we'll see you all next week.